Greetings friends, this is Henrik Palmgren. I hope you are doing well and that you feel good wherever you are, and hopefully you're excited to be on planet Earth. Welcome to everyone listening from around the world. This is independent radio for free-thinking individuals, the place where we're not afraid to entertain ideas, think bigger, broader, in an attempt to expand the tunnel of reality as we go searching for pieces to the puzzle, the image of the mysteries around us. We have anthropologist and author Jeremy Narby with us today from Switzerland, who back in 1999 released the book The Cosmic Serpent-DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. In 2006, Intelligence in Nature was released, and he joins us today to talk about his anthropological work in the Peruvian Amazon, living next to the RIR and studying the source of their knowledge. We talk about DNA, the roots of knowledge, the intelligence in nature, communication with entities beyond this world from deep within, experiences on ayahuasca, differences in culture, and much more. So stay with us for the next hour for a very interesting conversation with Jeremy Narby. I've been fascinated by your work ever since I read your book, The Cosmic Serpent, about 5 years ago. It must be now, can be even more, not quite sure, but Jeremy, to kind of get things going here and get things started off, in the beginning of your book, you mentioned that you started a 2-year period of field work to get your doctorate in anthropology from Stanford University. Why don't you just tell us a little bit why you chose, or rather had the desire to go to the Peruvian Amazon, the RIR-Jeremy, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly to be kind of more specific, but and live, with these people and study their culture and source of knowledge. Was this an accident, or was this a very conscious choice on your part, Jeremy?
Well, I'll tell you, at the time, which was more than 25 years ago, I was a young graduate student in anthropology at the University of Stanford, and I was interested in political and economic aspects of third world development. And a professor suggested that if I wanted to know more about issues pertaining to rich versus poor, the way to go about it was to look at questions involving indigenous peoples who find themselves in out-of-the-way places like the Arctic or the Amazon, and who occupy vast natural resources that development experts say they don't use rationally. So there was a conflict there in understanding just what is development between the World Bank, for example, and Amazonian Indians on the other hand. So it was really for these theoretical reasons, in other words, the most extreme case of differences, Amazonian Indians armed with bows and arrows versus the World Bank with hundreds of millions of dollars and bulldozers. So this was two completely different understandings of the world, but also how to develop a rainforest that were in presence. And so if one was a young graduate student in anthropology interested in third world development, the Peruvian Amazon at that point was a very interesting place to go. I actually didn't really want to go into a jungle filled with insects and other difficult creatures. I'd never been south of the equator, and actually as a white kid growing up in the suburbs of Montreal, I wasn't particularly attracted either to living with a bunch of Indians in the rainforest. But when one is a young student in anthropology, one has to go through this rite of passage, which is field work, in order to become a real anthropologist. Just like if you're a student in medicine, you have to go and work in a hospital and deal with the difficulties. So to rise to that challenge, I took up the idea of going to the Peruvian Amazon and living for 2 years with Ayaschanica Indians right in the middle of the rainforest, in an area where the World Bank and other development organizations were pouring hundreds of $millions into cutting down the rainforest and taking the land away from the Indians. And the point of the research, which was to be in solidarity with the Ayaschanica people and to show that they actually did use the rainforest in a rational way and therefore deserved the right to own it. So I was really looking into a conflict that involved material things such as territories and large development budgets.
I know that people are thinking about Avatar right now, obviously,
Right.
But that's a side note. What has happened if we just briefly talk? I mean, we have so much to discuss, but if we just briefly talk about how things turned out, have you been in contact with the people? What happened here?
Oh, you mean in the Peruvian Amazon regarding territory, indigenous people, and so on?
Yes.
Well, it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, one could say that there were quite a few victories for the people themselves. They actually got titles, land titles, to about 90% of the territories that they were claiming. However, that's kind of only a superficial victory, literally so, because the government owns the subsoil. And in the subsoil there is petroleum, for example. So the recent Peruvian government has actually sold most of the rights to the entire subsoil of the Peruvian Amazon to petroleum companies. And this gives them the right to go and, well, go where they want, drill the holes that they want, dynamite the seismic paths that they want to do, and this disrupts territory. And then when they finally do start extracting oil out of the rainforest, this comes with a huge ecological price, because the oil underneath this rainforest is filled with water. And when they extract the petroleum, each liter of petroleum comes accompanied by 9 liters of water that is filled with heavy metals, cadmium, lead, and other hydrocarbons. And many petroleum companies have just been pumping this stuff into the rivers. So slowly but surely, the Peruvian Amazon is filled with regional ecosystems that have been poisoned. Meanwhile, yes, the Indians do have titles to their territories, but they're being, gradually poisoned from the inside. So the last 25 years is really a mixed bag in terms of the political struggles of these people.
It's a disaster in that sense, and I can't believe that humanity is still, on the fuel of oil and gasoline and all that. But that's a different discussion. Jeremy, did you, when you went down there, did you ever anticipate or intended or even knew that you were going to try ayahuasca and some of these other hallucinogenic, plants and things like that?
Truth be told, when I was 24, I had taken LSD several times as a young student, one could say. And I'd also eaten psilocybin mushrooms and had let's say, a private interest. But it wasn't like the main focus of my life or anything. I'd also read the Carlos Castaneda books. So clearly, if one is going to go and hang out with some Amazonian Indians, yes, I knew ahead of time that there was a kind of a frisson or excitement that maybe they would indulge me in their hallucinogens. And yes, I'd read the anthropological literature before going, so I knew that there was this thing called ayahuasca, which at that point was an obscure Amazonian hallucinogen. I mean, most people in the world hadn't even heard of it unless you'd read the anthropological literature, or maybe William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg. But I thought that there might be the possibility of trying it, but at the same time, I viewed myself as doing serious political economic research for a leading American university. I had funding from the National Science Foundation, and, I was trying to do work that would actually be useful to the Indians themselves. So clearly, the main focus of my work was not going to be consuming indigenous hallucinogens.
You mentioned the book, obviously, of course, as well, that you kind of travel along in your journey